I never thought I'd be standing at her door, handing her my husband's things. But there I was, my world shattered and the truth coming out in the worst way. I'll never forget the look on Vanessa's face when I showed up at her door with Henry's stuff. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. To be honest, I almost didn't recognize myself in that moment, standing there, in front of her, the woman who thought she had it all. I had a front row seat to her carefully curated world shattering. It felt like time slowed down. For years, I was the one who played by the rules, lived in my lane, and believed my life was a picture-perfect fairy tale. Then, in one moment, I realized that everything, my marriage, my life, my trust, had been built on a lie. Have you ever been through something like this? Or maybe you can relate. Stay with me to the end of the story to see how the character overcame this struggle. I hope you will also consider subscribing to my channel, as it gives me the motivation to continue bringing you these compelling stories. Let me take you back. My name is Olivia Harrow, and I was once married to Henry Harrow, a man I thought was the love of my life. We'd been married for 12 years, living in a suburban neighborhood in Eastbrook, a place where families waved at each other while checking their mailboxes and everyone acted like they knew each other. We moved into our beautiful home when I was 27, and I thought, this is it. This is what happiness looks like. I'm 39 now. That same suburban dream world began to feel suffocating after a while. Henry was always working late, often coming home smelling like expensive cologne and sighing as if he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. I didn't think much of it. After all, he was a successful architect at a top firm, and I was proud of him. But lately, the scent of his cologne felt off. And something just didn't sit right when he'd forget the simplest things, like anniversaries or our weekend plans. He started getting distant, and so did I. One Thursday evening, Henry was late again. I stood in our bedroom, staring out of the window, looking at the shimmering lights of our neighborhood as my mind raced. The night was unusually quiet, with the hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog breaking the silence. The lights from our neighbors' houses glimmered in the cold night air, a stark contrast to the coldness settling deep within me. It should have been a peaceful moment, yet my thoughts were anything but calm. Every part of me felt on edge, as if something was wrong, but I couldn't quite place it. It was the third time this week he had stayed late at the office. Another late-night project, he claimed. Another important meeting. I wanted to believe him. I always did. For years, I had trusted Henry completely. He was the man I married, the father of my children, the one I built my life around. But tonight was different. Something told me I needed to check his phone. The thought was a whisper at first, barely perceptible. A small inkling of doubt in my gut that I chose to ignore for weeks. But tonight, the whisper grew louder. It wasn't like me to invade his privacy. I had always respected our boundaries. But this time something felt off. I knew the answer before I even touched his phone. But I still hesitated, my hands trembling as I reached for it on his nightstand. The phone had been buzzing nonstop the entire evening. Notifications, messages, each vibration a reminder that I was being left out of something. But I didn't want to know. Or at least I didn't want to admit what I was afraid of. But the pull was undeniable. I unlocked the phone, a few quick taps, and there it was. The truth. It only took a few minutes of scrolling through his messages to see what I never wanted to see. There, in plain sight, were explicit texts between him and Rachel Winters, our neighbor. Rachel, who had always been so kind to me. The woman who baked cookies for us when we moved in, who always waved at me from across the street as if we were friends. But the texts, they weren't just innocent flirtations or passing comments. No, it was months of secret rendezvous, inside jokes, and talk of sneaking away from our families. I saw pictures, some more explicit than others, exchanged like some hidden treasure between them. I felt my heart stop. I froze, unable to breathe, unable to move. The world around me seemed to tilt, everything spinning, collapsing in on itself. I had always trusted Henry. I thought we had a bond that nothing could break. We had been through so much together, our highs and lows, the late-night talks, the promises we made. But here it was, my entire world crashing down in one instant. The words on the screen blurred as my eyes filled with tears, but I wiped them away quickly, refusing to let the tears fall just yet. I didn't want to break down right here, not in this moment. I set the phone down slowly, my hands shaking as I tried to process what I had just seen. How could he do this to me? How could he betray me like this, right under my nose? Rachel, of all people, our neighbor, the one I had trusted, the one who had become so familiar in my life. And Henry, he had been lying to me for months. This wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was deliberate, planned. I walked around the room, pacing like a caged animal, my mind spiraling. Couldn't breathe. I couldn't think straight. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. Everything I knew, everything I had worked for, suddenly felt like a lie. I looked at the photographs on our walls, the family vacations, the happy moments, and I wondered how many of those moments had been tainted by lies, by the affair I hadn't known about. I felt a rush of anger bubbling up inside me. It was a slow burn at first, simmering beneath the surface. But the more I thought about it, the more it ignited into a wildfire of rage. How could he lie to my face every day, kiss me goodnight, and pretend like everything was fine, while secretly sleeping with another woman? Was I that blind? Had I missed the signs? I could feel my heartbeat in my chest, pounding louder and faster as I tried to control my emotions. The room was too small, too quiet. I needed to think. I needed to gather myself. I went to the bathroom, splashed some cold water on my face, trying to clear the fog in my mind. But nothing could shake the truth. There was no denying it now. My husband, the man I had spent 12 years of my life with, had betrayed me. And Rachel, our neighbor, our friend, had been right there with him, playing her part in this deceitful game. I walked back into the bedroom, staring at the phone on the nightstand. The evidence was undeniable, yet a part of me still wanted to hope it was all a mistake. Maybe there was a reason for it. Maybe he had a good explanation. But another, louder part of me knew the truth. There was no explanation that could fix this. There was no justification that would make this right. I didn't confront him right away. Couldn't. I needed to collect myself. I needed a plan. I had to be smart about this. The anger inside me was like a storm, fierce and uncontrollable, but I couldn't let it dictate my actions. I had to think, had to act with purpose. I sat on the bed, trying to steady my breathing, but all I could think about was the betrayal. The weight of it pressed down on me, suffocating me in a way I had never felt before. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to hit something, but instead I did nothing. I sat in silence, the storm inside me swirling, the noise of the world outside fading away until all I could hear was my own thoughts. Henry was still at work. I knew I had time, but every second that passed felt like an eternity. I couldn't let this moment pass without taking control of it. I needed answers. I needed to confront him. But how? I knew what I had to do. I had to make him face the consequences of his actions. He couldn't get away with this. Not this time. But I wasn't going to rush into anything. I was going to plan this carefully. After all, it wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about taking back my life, my dignity, and my future. I wouldn't let him destroy everything I had worked for. The anger simmered inside me, and with every passing moment, I felt more resolved. I would confront him. I would make him look me in the eye and explain why he had destroyed everything we had built. And when I was done, he would know that the consequences of his betrayal would follow him, no matter where he went. The next day, I woke up with clarity. The shock had passed, and what remained was a deep sense of betrayal and an overwhelming urge for justice. The fog of disbelief had lifted, and now all I could feel was the cold, hard truth sinking in. I wasn't just going to let Henry get away with this. I wasn't going to let Rachel get away with it either. I had never been a confrontational person. I had always been the type to try to avoid drama, to smooth things over, to keep the peace. But this was different. I had been betrayed. My life, my trust, everything I had built with Henry was nothing but a lie, and I refused to let them both get away with it without facing some consequences. No more hiding behind the facade of the perfect family. It was time to strip away the illusion. I picked up my phone and called my best friend, Chloe Simmons. She was the first person I thought of after the shock had worn off. Chloe and I had been inseparable since college. She was the type of person who always seemed to have everything figured out. And when it came to strategy, she was always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. I knew I needed her guidance now more than ever. "Liv, are you okay?" Chloe's voice came through the phone, filled with concern. "I don't know what to do, Chloe," I said, my voice trembling. "I found out everything. He's been seeing Rachel. All this time, behind my back." Chloe's silence on the other end of the line made my heart race. I could almost feel her mind working, processing the information. Then, after a pause, I heard the familiar sound of her exhale. That deep breath she took before unleashing a plan, like a general preparing for battle. "We're not letting them off easy, Liv. Not this time," she said, her voice steady now. "You have a plan, right? Because I've got a few ideas. We're going to make sure they pay for what they did." The words I had been longing to hear. Chloe understood. She wasn't telling me to forgive and forget or to try and work things out. No, she was in this with me. She would help me see this through. The fire that had been smoldering inside me since I discovered the truth began to burn brighter. "I'm not interested in taking the high road anymore," I admitted. "I don't care about forgiveness right now. I just want them to face the consequences." "Good," Chloe said, her voice turning sharp. "Because they're going to regret ever thinking they could get away with it." We talked for a few more minutes, laying out a plan. Chloe helped me focus, organizing my thoughts. I wasn't just going to let Henry pack his bags and walk out of my life without making a statement. No, I was going to confront him in a way that would make him remember this betrayal for the rest of his life. That afternoon, Chloe came over to help me pack up Henry's things. The house felt eerily quiet, the silence hanging heavy between us as we moved from room to room. I walked into our closet, standing in front of the clothes that had once been part of our life together. I ran my fingers along his favorite leather jacket, the one he wore on our trips to the mountains. It used to remind me of the adventures we promised to take when we were younger. Now it was just another piece of the puzzle, a symbol of everything that had been torn apart. Chloe, ever the strategist, moved efficiently, picking through his expensive suits and neatly folding them. She picked up the cologne bottle I had bought him on our 5th anniversary and held it up. "Doesn't it just smell like betrayal?" she asked, the bitterness in her voice matching my own. I nodded. The scent had always been familiar and comforting, but now, every time I caught a whiff of it, all I could think about was Rachel, the woman who had taken everything from me. But I wasn't just throwing his things out. This wasn't just about getting rid of him, it was about making a statement. I didn't want him to leave with his dignity intact. No, he needed to know that his actions had consequences, that the life he had built on lies wasn't going to be so easy to walk away from. I grabbed his favorite watch, the one he wore at our wedding, and held it in my hands for a moment, the weight of it heavier than I remembered. "This is the watch he wore when he promised to love me forever," I whispered, almost to myself. Felt like a cruel joke now. I had given him that watch with so much love, so many hopes and dreams for our future. And now it was just another symbol of his lies. I walked over to the large suitcase we had chosen for his things and carefully placed the watch inside. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of everything he had promised me. And now it was a reminder of the betrayal that had shattered all of those promises. As Chloe worked next to me, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This wasn't the chaotic, emotional breakdown I had expected. No, it was different. I wasn't in a rush. I wasn't desperate. I was in control. The clarity I had gained the night before was still with me, and it gave me the strength to continue. I was taking the power back. When everything was packed, Chloe looked at me, her expression both sad and determined. "Are you sure you want to do this, Liv? This is going to change everything," she said, her voice soft but serious. I met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. It wasn't just about Henry anymore. It wasn't just about Rachel. This was about me. It was about reclaiming my life and my dignity. I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all Henry and Rachel, walk away from this unscathed. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady. "I've made up my mind. It's time for them to face the consequences. Chloe nodded and helped me load the suitcase into the car. We didn't say much as we drove to Rachel's house. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional turn of the wheels on the road. But inside, I was preparing myself for what was coming. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I also knew it was necessary. They needed to understand that their actions had repercussions. As we neared Rachel's house, I felt my heart race again. It wasn't fear. It was anticipation. This was the moment I had been preparing for. And when I knocked on her door, I was going to make sure she understood the gravity of what she had done. Hey, are you finding the story interesting so far? If you are, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can continue the adventure together. The best part is just ahead. I remember the moment so vividly. Chloe and I pulled up to Rachel's house with the suitcases in tow. Her house stood there, tall and pristine, much like the life she had built on lies. It was almost too perfect, too unblemished, a facade of an ideal life that hid so much ugliness behind it. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding in my chest, but I steadied my breath, trying to keep the anger under control. Rachel opened the door, her perfectly manicured smile fading when she saw me. "Olivia? What's?" "Rachel," I said, forcing a smile. It felt like a mask, but I knew I had to keep it on. "I brought Henry's things. Since he spends so much time here when I'm not around, I thought he might need them." She paled, taking a quick step back, her eyes darting to the suitcases in my hands, as if she wanted to push them away, erase them from her doorstep. "What do you mean?" Before I could respond, I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling into the driveway. It was Ethan, my neighbor and the one person who had no idea what was going on behind his back. He wasn't supposed to be home, but as luck would have it, he arrived early. The look on his face when he saw the suitcases was priceless. His confusion slowly turned into realization, and a small part of me relished the way his world was starting to collapse, just like mine had. He had been oblivious, living his life in a bubble, but now it was all crashing down. The man who had stood by Rachel's side, who had trusted her, was about to witness his own betrayal. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice tentative, eyes flickering between Rachel and me, still not quite understanding. I didn't wait for Rachel to answer. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the pavement, the suitcases heavy in my hands but not as heavy as the weight on my chest. "Your wife has been having an affair with my husband for the past 6 months, I said, my voice steady but firm. "I found out yesterday. I brought his things here because it's clear this is where he's been staying." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Ethan's eyes widened, and I could see the exact moment when the truth hit him, a punch to his gut. He looked at Rachel, his face a mixture of disbelief and rage. But even more than that, there was a deep sadness. He had been lied to for months. I could see it all in his eyes, the realization that everything he thought he knew about his life, about his marriage, was now shattered. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, and for a brief moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. She was crying, mascara streaking down her face, her shoulders shaking as though she was the victim. I could see her trying to maintain her composure, but her mask was slipping. I didn't have any sympathy left for her. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. It was about taking back control. I stood still, watching her collapse emotionally, my anger simmering just below the surface. I thought of all the times she had smiled at me, all the moments we'd shared as neighbors, as friends. At least that's what I had thought. None of it had been real. She had been playing me the entire time. Ethan turned to Rachel, his voice barely a whisper at first, but the words were sharp, demanding, filled with the hurt of betrayal. "How long?" he asked. The question wasn't just a simple inquiry. It was the demand for answers, for truth. He needed to know when his wife had decided to destroy their marriage. Rachel couldn't answer. Her mouth opened and closed, but the words stuck in her throat. The silence in the room was suffocating. Finally, the dam broke, and she broke down, her mascara streaking down her face as she crumpled in Ethan's arms. He pulled her into a hug, trying to console her despite the shock. I could see the anguish on his face, but there was something else there too. Anger. He was holding her, but I could tell he was angry at her. Angry that she had lied to him for so long. Angry that the house, once pristine, now felt like a prison. The walls, which had held the lies, the secrets, now seemed to be closing in on us. Ethan was trying to hold it together, but I could see the pain in his eyes. He was devastated, and yet, I could see the flicker of a deeper emotion, anger and disbelief, that had started to simmer beneath the surface. "You knew," I said quietly, watching the exchange between them. "You both knew, and now here we are." Ethan turned to me, his eyes searching mine as if asking why. But I didn't have to explain. He already knew. He knew this wasn't just about me. This was about Rachel's betrayal, her manipulation. I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to process everything in real time. But no amount of thinking was going to change the fact that Rachel had shattered everything. Rachel sobbed harder, burying her face in Ethan's chest as if she were the victim in all of this. It was almost comical, the way she clung to him for support after everything she had done. But I didn't have time for her theatrics. I had to make sure that Ethan didn't let her get away with it. I moved forward, closer to Ethan, and gently touched his arm. "Ethan," I said, my voice softer now, trying to get his attention. "I'm sorry. This isn't your fault. You didn't deserve this." Ethan looked at me, his eyes filled with conflict. He still hadn't fully processed what was going on. He still wanted to believe in Rachel, to hold on to the image of the woman he loved. But reality was a harsh teacher, and it was quickly becoming clear that Rachel's betrayal ran deeper than he could have ever imagined. I turned to Rachel, who was still sobbing, her body trembling in Ethan's arms. "This isn't the way things were supposed to go, Rachel," I said. "You've made your choices, and now you'll face the consequences." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The world outside continued as normal, but inside this house, everything was different. Everything had changed. Ethan, Rachel, and I were trapped in this moment, facing the truth that could never be undone. And I wasn't going to let them forget it. In the weeks that followed, I did what I had to do. I filed for divorce and made sure Henry didn't get a dime of what we had built together. I'd always been the one to play it fair, the one to believe that marriage was about compromise, loyalty, and love. But Henry had broken all of those rules. This time, there was no compromise left for him. He had no choice but to leave our home, the one that once held so many memories, now tainted by his betrayal. I wanted to make sure that the life we had created together wasn't going to be his to take with him. Not a single piece of it. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a hollow shell. The quiet after he left was suffocating, but it was also a relief. His presence had been like a slow, creeping fog over the years, clouding everything I had believed in. And when he was gone, I finally felt the weight lift. There was a strange peace in the silence. The same silence that had once been filled with laughter and love now echoed with the possibilities of what could come next. As for Rachel, well, Ethan and I decided we'd start over, together but not as a couple. Our shared trauma brought us close, and we started building a new friendship based on mutual respect and understanding. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't something that happened overnight. There were still awkward moments when we didn't quite know where to place our friendship, especially in the first few weeks. But we were both broken, and in a strange way that made us stronger together. Ethan was the kind of person who didn't ask for anything but gave everything. He had been betrayed just as I had, and though we had our own battles to face, there was something healing in knowing we weren't alone. I remember one quiet afternoon, just a few weeks after everything had happened. We were sitting on a bench in the park near my place, talking about our lives and what we wanted for the future. Neither of us had any romantic aspirations, but there was a connection, a friendship that ran deeper than either of us had expected. We shared stories, laughed at stupid jokes, and for the first time in a long while I felt like myself again. Henry tried to reach out a few times, sending me flowers, begging for a second chance. The messages started off as pleading, full of regret and sorrow. At first, I was tempted just a little bit. He had been my husband for 12 years. We had built something together, and it was hard to just throw it all away. But then, I thought about everything. All the lies, all the times he told me he loved me while doing the exact opposite behind my back. I didn't need his apology. The pain he caused me would never be healed by a few flowers or promises of change. Those words felt empty. They weren't enough to erase the betrayal. I didn't respond to his texts, and I didn't answer his calls. Every time my phone lit up with his name, I felt the anger flare up again. But then I took a deep breath, reminded myself that I was stronger than that, and I let it go. The most powerful thing I could do for myself was to not let him have any more power over me, even in the smallest way. As for Rachel, I heard she and Ethan eventually worked through their own issues, but I think the damage was done. Some things can't be undone. The cracks in their relationship were too deep. I saw it in Ethan's eyes every time we spoke about it. He wanted to move on, but I knew he would always carry the weight of her betrayal. She had shattered something that couldn't be fixed. The truth had come out, but the scars would remain. As for me, I moved on. I focused on my career, traveling to places I'd only dreamed of. I started new projects, built new relationships, and learned to trust again, this time in myself. I took a solo trip to Paris, something I had always wanted to do but had never had the courage to. It was my first real step towards finding myself again. The city was beautiful, alive with energy, and for the first time in months, I felt a deep sense of peace. I met new people, learned new things, and most importantly, I learned to trust myself. The world felt different now. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I had come to realize that the greatest strength didn't come from holding on to old memories, but from building new ones, from taking the lessons and the pain and turning it into something that shaped me into a better, stronger person. I started writing again. I had always wanted to write a book, but Henry's career, my job, and the responsibilities of marriage had always come first. Now I found the time. My first project was a blog where I could channel my thoughts, my experiences, and my healing process. It became a way for me to communicate with others who had gone through similar things. I had no idea how many people out there were just like me, people who were trying to rebuild their lives after betrayal, after loss, after pain. I started getting messages from strangers who had been through their own versions of heartbreak, and it felt comforting to know that I wasn't alone. And every time I think about that day, when I stood there in front of Rachel, handing her Henry's belongings, I smile. Not because I found joy in their pain, but because I realized that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about rebuilding yourself, taking back your dignity, finding your own peace. And that, for me, was the ultimate victory. I realized that the person I had been was just a version of myself. Now I was someone else, stronger, wiser, and more in tune with who I was. I knew that there were still hard days ahead, still moments when I would miss what we had built together. But those moments were becoming fewer and farther apart. What mattered now was that I was moving forward, one step at a time. I'd love to know your thoughts. What did you think of Olivia's journey? Did you find strength in her story or see parts of yourself in her struggle? Feel free to share your feelings and reflections in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you won't miss out on the next story I have in store for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story from start to finish. You're a part of this journey too, and I'm grateful for you being here.